there. This is 52 Weeks Live, and I am going to invite sweet Harry Heissmann there we go, to join us.
And here I am. I mastered the freaking thing.
I can't see. There I can see your whole face. Good. I was getting a little. Do you believe this weather?
No, not really. I mean, I'm trying to, like, what are you saying? You can't see me?
I was losing the bottom half of your face.
Oh. Oh, okay. Is that better?
That's so much better. And I'm
Let me turn up my volume too.
sorry. I'm for some reason the light is blowing me out. I beg your pardon. I felt like the only bright spot on this day.
Well, you are. You certainly are.
No. Harry, my dear Herr Harry.
Harry.
Herr Harry, how are you?
Oh, listen, I always say I'm just exquisite, and I'm going to say that again to you. I'm really excited about this because, I've apparently watched back like all the ones you did, and I'm watching them as much as I can. And I just love how this all works and the questions you ask and, how fun.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think anybody who watches this, and obviously me, its main watcher, is just totally interested in hearing how really cool, talented people, all doing the same things, but how differently we all do it and what goes into it.
Yeah, nobody really knows how much actually does go into it.
Yeah, totally. So tell me, okay, I couldn't, are you from Munich, or that's just where you went to school?
So are you asking me, like, how did it all start and
How did it all start?
All that? Okay, so I'm apparently German, which can't be denied due to my accent. I was born in Bonn, Germany.
I have been to Bonn.
Didn't really live there for too long because my mom got married a second time and we moved to Stuttgart, which is in the southern part of Germany. I did not particularly like it there, and I also didn't like the second husband particularly.
Did we like the husband at least?
Say again?
Did we like the new husband?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, that certainly puts a pall on everything.
Come on. Samson is like shivering and shaking because of the rain. Come on in. Come on. Let's go in here. Come on. Anyway, so, not even the Luigi Colani desk that I had when I was sitting in my room working didn't really make up for all the rest that I was not happy with.
Yeah.
So I convinced my mother that I needed to go to boarding school. And
at what age?
Say again?
What age?
I was probably like, 11-ish, something like that.
Wow.
And I ended up in Baden-Baden, which is like in the, Black Forest region, one of the most beautiful places that I can think of. And that's where I sort of, thinking back, I mean, of course, there's like other important things that I didn't mention with my grandmother and so on and so on. Anyway, I practically would say that I grew up in the boarding school because, we all came from like sort of weird families, disheveled families, dysfunctional families, and, some real families, and sort of like were thrown into one pot. And it was a wonderful, and, it was a melting pot because we had like all sorts of ethnicities at our school, which was really great. So did that boarding school, then did like every good German boy at the time had to do. I went to military service, believe it or not. Did that somewhere in the middle of nowhere. and then actually had to do 3 internships that were required to even apply for a spot at the Academy of Fine Arts. And each of those internships are 3 months long. They're wood, metal, and plastic. I don't really know if that's still the case, but back then that's what it was. So you had to, before you even applied, they asked you for 9 months of internships that you had to, you know, send certificates in for. And then the next thing is, and I don't know if people know.
And did you love those internships?
Oh,
was
I
Was
loved
there
it
one that was really amazing, or?
the plastic one? I mean, it was like, you know, it was a factory that produces sort of like subway seating and like bus shelter roofs and stuff like that. And it was like such a weird thing to be working with and in, and see all the people like being like really serious about their work. But I really liked that. And I mean, I like all of them because the metal one was like pretty amazing too. And then the wood one. So you get this sort of like early on little insight and training. And then what I started to say is, I don't know if people know this, but in Germany, you don't pay tuition. You sort of apply for the universities, and, you know, academies, and it is all like a working thing. So in other words, you have to
right,
work
like
really
almost
hard.
a technical or a
Well,
polytechnic, or
it's that, but then there's also like, you know, hundreds of students applying each semester, and they take out like, I mean, the academy back then, they took out 20 people out of like the hundreds that participated in the final test, and then out of those 20, 10 get the spot.
Wow.
So it's basically a little bit like winning the lottery, and
only you have to work for it.
you have to work for it. And you know, it's funny because just this morning I was like reading on Instagram, like Aaron Lauder had this quote on from Estee Lauder saying, "I never dreamt of success, I worked for it."
Yeah.
And you know, I'm pretty much like that too, because I work really hard, and I always did. And so, you know, that's sort of like, it's like sort of carrying some fruit on that tree now. You know, it's like, it has been, listen, it's funny, it's 26, we're number 26 because that's the amount of years that I've been in New York.
Yeah.
And also that I've been working in interior design.
Wow. So we should all go get lottery tickets tonight.
Probably.
So I know you take like wonderful pride in approaching life with humor and joie de vivre. Were you like that already?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I know you pride yourself on having humor and happiness and joy and everything that you do. Were you already like that?
Yeah, you know, that's like a trait I sort of inherited from my mother, because she always believed that you shouldn't show any outside person how you really feel. You should always be walking around with a smile.
That's a separate point entirely. I mean,
Well,
were you joyful, or were you just putting your joyful foot forward?
No. I'm really like waking up happy, basically. Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Well, I credit, like, you know, what I really like to do, I don't know about you, but I like to sort of, I wake up early and need to drink something or something, and then I go back to bed, and that phase that you're sort of like half asleep, and you're really dreaming like super vividly in color, I may add. Yeah. So that to me is like the most amazing thing. That's also, believe it or not, where I get like a lot of ideas and inspiration. I totally believe it. So that makes me wake up with like, you know, wow, let's do this.
Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, at least for the first 5 minutes, like.
Yay.
Yay.
So you're in Munich, you finish, you get your degree. Is it a 4-year program?
It's like, actually, yeah, it's a pretty long, intense thing. You're like working.
Did you have a thesis or a final project?
Oh yeah, you have a thesis, and then, you know, what's really great about, let me just do one quick thing. Hold on. Sure.
While you're doing that, I will have Percy say hello. Hi.
Look, I did the same thing. Here's Samson, who is not happy about the rain because it's like dripping on the air conditioner and it makes that weird sound.
Yeah. The tap,
He does
tap,
not
tap.
like that. Anyway, back to the academy. What was amazing about that time was that we had all the workshops that the artists use on the first floor. So there was a plastic shop, a jewelry shop, a glass shop, a photography studio, a wood shop, a metal shop. I mean, you name it, they had it. And you were able to learn from all these instructors, most of which apparently were artists too, how to bring your ideas to life.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's what our professors wanted. I mean, you couldn't just dream up something, you had to actually build it like full scale.
Yeah. And you knew exactly where you wanted to take this education? Did you know it was interiors, or were you also a painter?
No. I always knew that. I mean, it is an interior design program.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. That makes me think, are you involved at all with NICED?
I am. I teach at NICED, yeah.
There you go, because that is so, yeah, that's obviously a perfect fit. I love NICED. This house is very NICED forward. So when did you come to New York? Besides 26 years ago.
You mean like, before? So I
like, when did you wake up and say, okay, well, this is where I need to be?
All right. What
if that's what you
was, and this is sort of like, TMI, but I went to a New Year's Eve party in Munich. Independent. I didn't live there yet. I was going there, and I went to a party that was pretty fancy. So you were wearing a tuxedo, and after that, I went to a friend's house for another party, and at that friend's house was another guy who also wore a tuxedo. His was white, mine was black. Mm-hmm. So we immediately sort of got attracted to each other because we were the only ones in tuxedos, and we started talking. And he is still my friend Kurt, who lives in New York, and he is actually mainly, I will say, the reason that I first came, because he said hey, why don't you come visit? So I did. And if you really want to know what attracted me at the beginning, besides the sidewalks and, skylines and all that, one of the first nights we went to the Roxy.
Yeah. And, I went to roller skating birthday parties at the Roxy.
Well, the party we went to didn't really have that much.
It's a little different.
With roller
the swing, right?
Well,
the swing in the middle.
It was sort of. It was a different kind of roller skating. Let's just put it that way. It was the time that New York apparently was very different. It was super creative. The drag queens had spent weeks figuring out their outfits. And would show up, and I just remember, and this is sort of etched in my memory, I was standing there watching the dance floor, and they had a big swing that was going back and forth that people would swing on, and it was Naomi Campbell and Linda Evangelista on that swing going, and I couldn't not believe that alone.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I feel this enormous presence behind me, and I'm sort of, I didn't really know what it was, but I had to turn around. So some guy had attached an entire magnolia tree in bloom to his back with a black harness, and literally was wearing not much else but that. And this sort of walked by, and I don't know, museums, skyline, energy, city. I just completely fell in love with New York, and that's when I decided I wanted to go.
Such a crazy, fun youth culture. There's great old culture too, for old people or for every age group. But that I can absolutely see how that would seduce you. Just the sizzle in the air.
Totally. So that's I was just in awe, and I needed to get my act together. my dad was not too crazy about the whole idea of me moving, and my
So,
mom and
did your father live near where you got near Stuttgart?
no, he was in the north of Germany too, but I mean we didn't really see each other like that much, unfortunately. So but when it came to that, he was sort of upset that I wasn't doing what he was doing. And so anyway, I moved to New York, and it was sort of like a typical, I mean, this sounds like so like, Danielle Steele, like, it's I sold my first collection of Christmas tree stands, antique German Christmas tree stands, and I made the equivalent of like $5,000 in like a few days, which, back then was a ton of money.
Oh yeah.
So I literally moved to New York. I was freeloading at Kurt's apartment, who lived someplace else at the time. I was taking care of his cats, sort of paid the utilities and whatever. And I got here with, a suitcase, $5,000, and 2 plastic bags. And I mean, I know this is like super cliche, but
it's so great.
It's really how it worked. And and then I will really say, and I'm sure you know what I mean by that, a lot of what I am has to do with people that I met along the way, and people that afforded me things, and people that sort of like allowed me things. And believe it or not, the first person to do that was Jeffrey Bilhuber. I was going to a party that he was having at his, at the time, office. He had these salons. And, you would go there, and he always had art openings for artists. And a friend of mine, another reason that this all happened, because he's the one that told me about it, my friend Daniel said, hey, come, like, I'm cater waitering at this party tonight at an interior designer's office, and I think you should come along. So I did, and it ended up
as a waiter.
Well,
or he's saying you should go to the party.
He was the waiter. I was sneaking in with him. And I talked to Jeffrey, and I said, hey, like, do you have any openings? And Jeffrey said, not really, but why don't you come by and show me your books? So I did that, and I helped him doing like a presentation for a few weeks. But, in turn, I was able to put a New York name on my resume, which was like a huge problem at the time, because people were saying, what's your experience? Like, where did you work? Like, do you have like 5 years under your belt? And so that was the problem. So I was able to put a New York name on my resume. And then I started working for Juan Pablo Molyneux. And I worked there for 3.5, almost 4 years.
And how many languages do you speak?
Oh, like 1,000. No, I'm kidding. Well, I speak English. I used to speak French almost the way I speak English, with a heavy accent, of course. I can order and sort of understand what people say, but to go back into French, I have to be there for a while.
Of course.
So I sort of like dislearned that. If there's
because with Juan Pablo, I would assume you were all over the place. Yes.
Pretty much, yeah. And then, I mean, apparently I speak German, so and I understand like a little Italian, but that's about it.
It's pretty good. So, and how long were you at his office?
Like 3.5, 3.75 years, something like that.
And in the same time, are you meeting other designers and like joining the family of the design world?
Well, I've always been going to, I mean, I jokingly refer to that as like the opening of an envelope or the opening of a toilet seat.
Yeah.
I always go to art openings, not so much anymore, but I used to at the time. And, back then there were a lot of events for interior designers to go to. So I did go to a lot of parties and things and sort of mingled. But, I don't really think that I met too many colleagues during my tenure at Juan Pablo's office.
So how are you making friends?
That came later.
Okay. And what do you think you learned from those offices? I mean, granted, Jeffrey, it sounds like it was a small thing, but what did you take from them? What were like the big nuggets that you walked away with?
Juan Pablo still, I'm still in awe of him because he is one of the only people I know that works with all these materials and, art pieces and antiques.
Yeah.
And
I remember a leather floor he did at a show house. Do you remember that? At Time Warner?
I don't.
He had a leather herringbone that had been stitched, and it was crazy.
I don't remember that, but I can tell you that, I've probably seen, while I worked there, I've probably seen materials that are extinct by now kind of thing. And, that's one of the things.
No thanks to you.
The quality of his work and the detail is pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like a lot of red velvet wrapped poster beds.
Yeah, but then the red velvet is like Sabina Faye Braxton first, and then it becomes that. So there's always the extra step, you know. So so the materials were unbelievable. The antiques were unbelievable. This is like sort of like the last big hurrah of like classic interior design that happened in the 90s. It was like all these people like Segura and Mallet and Ariane Dandois, like all these people. It was like the age of the antiquaire, or the decade of the antiquaire, I want to say, that were still like, Steinitz and all those people that were really like incredible. And, it's also the time when people had real photographs that were 8x10, amazing quality, and they had all the measurements and all the details on the back, and you never had a question about, like nowadays it's like you have to like call, and if you're lucky you get like a call back, but all the specs you needed, seat height, seat depth, seat width, arm height, the arm pad is like yay high from the floor, all that stuff was on that tear sheet.
Yeah. And it was such a
today you can be happy to get an email with like a bad photo that then you print out that you don't want to show to your client.
Well, let's hope that digital photographs are great though. I remember DeAngelis didn't used to have, like, you just take stacks of photos. Like action photos,
but
they take it not in a beautiful. Yeah, and they were just taken in the back room, amidst everything else. But yeah, it's such glamour and also such innocence in that. I would take a picture of a museum quality table with a Polaroid.
But then going to, if you're asking about what I took from all those offices, then speaking of black and white. Mr. Hadley was obsessed with black and white magazines from, the 40s and the 50s that then would have like a little text box at the side, and they would say, the sofa is like of vermilion silk, and the floor is like, the carpet is like emerald green. So what he always said, and I think this is so amazing, and this is like sort of like the main, not the main thing, but one of the main things that stuck with me. He said it, what's so great about that is that everybody could imagine what this color was going to look like in their head.
Yeah.
So it was basically every person would have a different perception and a different image in their head from that room. And I think that's so wonderful because it's so democratic. It's so like,
but it's also like fantasy.
Totally.
In lockstep with your imagination.
And that is what I think is like, a lot of times missing nowadays is that whole like, go there, like think it, be it, dream it, like whatever. The fantasy thing is like extremely important to me.
I think so more and more every day. So I assume that your magic shop, your desk, as Albert would call it, was just piled high with fantasy.
No, because our desks were empty.
Well, why? Oh, well, he was just talking about you, the magician.
No, no, no. What I'm saying is, I mean, we would have a lot there, but and this is so funny because he would also then always tell you at the end of the day, clean your desk, take everything away, and put it away. So when you come here in the morning, you have a fresh start.
Ooh, that's a lesson I have not learned. Have you kept that with you?
Well, I'm trying. I mean, I'm not very successful at it mostly, but it's a really great idea, especially on a summer Friday. So
Or
you
a
don't
summer Thursday.
so
Yeah.
you don't come back and look at piles of unopened mail and you're like, oh, here I go again. It's sort of like it gives you the illusion of a blank slate and a clear mind. And
So taking what you just said, coming at work with a sense of illusion, with joy, with materiality. When you start a project, what goes on in your head? Somebody calls you, they say, we'd like to hire you, we've got this. What's the best version of that unfolding?
okay, so the first thing would be that I want to go see the place. That's the first thing. And people always laugh and say yeah, sure, right. You might try that story on your hairdresser, which apparently I'm not using anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
But what
why don't people believe that?
No, they don't believe what I'm going to say to you now.
Oh, okay.
When I go to the jobs, I sort of feel, I mean, it's a little hard to explain without sounding sort of weird, but I sort of see how it will be finished. I sort of see what it needs. I sort of see, there's a lot of construction, there's not a lot of construction. This is going to be red, this is going to be green. This needs
so you go that granular.
Yeah.
You know what the room colors will be.
Well, I mean, maybe not immediately. So when I was talking to you earlier about having this half asleep state in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
so most of my ideas actually are born between that and the morning shower.
I totally agree.
Because when I'm in the shower, it's sort of it's.
I think water. I think that's a thing. I think everybody. Well, and also it's the only place where we can't take our phone with us. So we're forced to work within our mind's eye as opposed to looking at a screen.
That's totally true. You can't take your phone with you, but
And even if I could, my glasses have to come off.
It's,
so it's like
it's also your private. It's your alone time.
Yeah, meditative.
It's right. I mean, unless you don't shower alone, which of course also can happen.
Yeah.
But that's usually when these ideas are born. And then I really believe, and I'm sure you do the same thing, the first initial super important thing that most people forget or have forgotten, you need that floor plan. You just need that floor plan. And that to me is the first thing I do. I have a plan. I mean, even sometimes when you're waiting for the architect to send or the client to send you the actual plan, or it needs to be done because they don't have one, which also happens.
Yeah.
I print out the real estate thing from online, and
then correct the dimensions.
Well, that's why I'm doodling on immediately. So it's the old way of doing stuff. There's a carpet, there's the furniture that goes on it, and that doesn't sit half on, half off kind of thing. And that way you immediately get a feel for the volume of the room. And as an example, I'm a stickler for when you open magazines and you see that the chandelier is looks like it was made for Barbie. It's basically a little light bulb dangling from the ceiling. And so I want this all to sort of you know, be proportionate and flow together and be the right side. So the only way to feel that, to get near it, is to draw it.
Yeah.
And to sketch it. And, you know, and then the funny thing is, I do like a few floor plan versions, and I always, I mean, let's say 99% go back to the first initial idea that was drawn on paper.
Yeah. I definitely think it's easier to figure that out when you're standing in the room, because then you really see the space and you have a better idea of what pieces need to occupy. Sorry.
That's okay.
What pieces, you know, the room can really take. But yeah, the furniture plan, if you don't have the furniture plan, what are you going to do? I mean, do you draw a lot? Do you draw hand-drawn elevations and renderings, and or do you do it for yourself?
So here's the thing. I want to be honest with you.
Me too. I want you to be honest.
No. I know, and this is, you know, this is sort of tempting and dangerous at the same time. I basically always, I mean, I do the floor plan, and the elevation I really only do if I need to try on like a specific piece of furniture. If I need to see, like, you know, is that grandfather clock like big enough or too small, or like what's the story, or, you know, what's the proportion of that, you know, chest or
next to the chairs,
whatever.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's basically like floor plans that I work with mainly.
Yeah.
And then I cannot do CAD. I have no idea how it works.
Neither.
So if anybody needs that or wants that, I have to farm it out. So far, like, not too many people have requested that. Mm-hmm. But and it's sort of the same with renderings. I mean, I can sort of initially doodle what I'm thinking about. I'm certainly not like a rendering person. I mean, that's not. I mean, like, you know, when I look at your dad, for example, I mean, something like.
Well, that. I mean, he loved painting, so that's a completely different thing.
Well, but, you know, there is people, like, even today, that can do these things, and that.
No, and it's wonderful, but I don't think it's necessary to be good at it.
It's not necessary in my book, but you asked me about it, so
yeah.
You know, so that was the answer. No, I don't really do renderings. If people want them, I have to farm them out.
Yeah. So you've gone in, you sketched the furniture plan. What tools in your toolbox are you pulling out when you're dreaming up the room? What are, you know, like, it depends on where I am coloristically in a given moment in my life, but I want to see how the colors spread out through the room, or, you know, I hate it when, like, all of the colors on one side and not on the other, and trying to balance, you know, what are the things that you're thinking about while you're doing it?
Well, I mean, like I said before, I usually start with like one key, like it's usually a carpet or a rug.
Yeah.
You know, that I start with, which I think you should start with, or whatever the floor material is, wood, marble, you know, whatever. And then there's always some key element. It could be like a wallpaper, like scenic panels, like some kind of wall finish that you have thought of. And that's what I usually start. I mean, I usually start with like the 5 walls, as I call it, because the ceiling is a wall too. And the floor. And that's, you know, sort of like the starting point. And then I go around and sort of like close it in. So what's on the wall? You know, what's like the key piece of furniture? What's the key art piece? If there is something like that.
You obviously have these very alive rooms that you design with. There's a tremendous amount of movement and personality, and they're very beautiful and rich. But they're very, you know, they're not wishy-washy at all, which is great. So how do you like to connect rooms that are each so strong and amazing? Is there some material that you use as you string them along, or a philosophy of color, or is it sky's the limit? You know, I I find that like to be a very interesting part of design, how people make the whole thing coherent while still having very energetic rooms in and of themselves.
I think that goes, I mean, like going back to the floor, I think the floors are sort of like what's connecting that. I'm not a huge fan. I mean, if I can somehow avoid it, I don't want like a saddle like between like one room and like each room. I like to have floors sort of like go through as best as they can, like be there wood or terrazzo or like whatever, and then go on it with different other materials. So I think the floor is like one thing. And then I also think, you know, color is certainly like a very important element in stringing them along. So, I mean, we always talk about, you know, what are the rooms that you can be like more adventurous with? What are the rooms that you need to sort of like tone yourself down a little bit, or not, you know? And I really feel that once you, and you know this better than anybody, once you know the rules and you know them well, you can also break them.
You can break them. Yeah.
And I think the, you know, the rooms like stringing on, so it's you come in, like, I mean, to me that's important, like coming, like how do you come into a house, like what's your first
what's the opening statement,
what's the opening scene, and then where do you go from there, and do you really want to like give away, I mean, this is another like Hadleyism, don't give away everything you have to offer in the first
shot. You know? I feel like that's an architect's thing too. I'm always interested when I'm talking to an architect about whether they want to do what you're saying, like you walk in and there's a wall and maybe two doors and you don't see the big room behind it, or the contrary. And it's like you can divide all architects into those two camps. The ones who, but it's difficult because you look at a house like Vaux le Vicomte, which is one of my favorite houses of all time. And when you open the front door, your eye shoots through the whole house and out the back. And that feels like a very unusual, you know, that's maybe one house that I can think of where that's the case. Well,
then there's also just a handful of houses where you want that to happen, because usually what you see out back is not the most attractive thing.
Sure. Well, or yes, not every house is Vaux le Vicomte, for sure.
Right.
Would that it were. So you do like to have a little bit of a little seduction at first glance that pulls you into the interiors.
Yeah.
So, and how do you feel about enfilades? Because, you know, that's obviously, you're getting so much information from one room to the next to the next.
Well, how do I feel about them? I love them, because when I think about them, you know, I immediately think of, I mean, it really depends on where they are again. I mean, I love them in Paris. I love them in Germany. I love them in England. There certainly is like some cool ones in New York. Again, it sort of like depends on what's happening there, and, you know, like how is this all like working. But,
What?
I don't know what that is.
I don't either. You mean you don't have a live cicada in your house?
There might be some somewhere.
So when you said you think to yourself, where can you really go for it, and where should you subdue yourself, and where should you ignore all the rules? Do you have certain rooms you love to just put it all in?
You know, I've really learned that I work best when, I don't want to say when clients leave me alone, but when you sort, and it doesn't
But that's what you mean.
Well, if, you know, if you have sort of like a carte blanche situation, that certainly helps. But
do you ever have that?
Yeah.
Wow. I can't, even on the most enormous jobs that I've done, I've never had anybody say, well, maybe because I warned them. I say, don't give me carte blanche because crazy things will happen.
Well, I mean, you know, when I say that, I mean, that mainly happens with like repeat clients with clients that you've worked with before.
Sure. You
I
have
mean,
the relationship.
it has not really happened to me in like an initial job. You know, that people say like, oh yeah, sure, just go ahead, we'll go on a pleasure like it used to be. You know, this is going back to you know, the stories that Mr. Hadley told us, that people would go on literally a pleasure cruise around the world and they would be gone for a year. And while that was happening, their houses were redone and they came back and everything was done. And the bill was handed over and the client paid and that was it.
Yeah. What a different
Wouldn't that
world.
be nice?
Yeah.
Nowadays, people need to live, that they want to live in their house while the whole construction is going on. And they're camping out in a tent in the bedroom. I mean, I'm kidding. But it's sort of
I
that.
actually did that. I did that myself when my apartment was being rejiggered. And it was horrendous. I think somebody is asking about that goose behind you.
That's not a goose, it's a swan. It's a swan so, well, okay, so are we now into like identifying what everything is? So there's a swan tureen.
Uh-huh.
That's Italian.
Ceramic?
It's ceramic. Then there's a Fornasetti hat planner, Caspo. There is a Friends with You little cloud vase. And a Kenny Sharp.
So how do you live at home? How do you like to live yourself?
With like
You've come home from the pleasure. Come back and join us. You've come back from your pleasure cruise, and you walk into your door. What is the environment you, as a creative person, that you love to be in?
Oh, I'm surrounded by my friends, how I call them. So I have like a myriad of collections. Most of them have eyes, you know, or like some kind of animal related, like the swan or, you know, something like that. And that again is like, you know, when I first moved into this apartment, one of the first guests that came was Mr. Hadley. And he walked in, he sat down, of course, lit a cigarette without asking if he was allowed to or not.
Well, it was back in the day.
No, I just loved him for that. You know, he was the only person to like get away with that stuff. And no one would ever say anything. I mean, he would do that like, you know, any place basically. So he sat down, he looked around and he said like, oh, I'm going to call this the House of Friends. And I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, if you look around, all the things that are here have eyes or a personality.
Yeah.
And he's right. He was right, you know. So I have tons and tons of things. I mean, it's basically, I hate to admit it, but it's true. It is almost hoarder like because
Well, no.
I like to collect.
Menagerie.
I have thousands of books.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, you name it, and the book is there somewhere. And yeah, so I mean, I like things. I like color.
Yeah.
I like, you know, personality, friends.
Yes, you do. You do like those things. Okay. Somebody asked a question, which is, you know, there's something that we all get about Pinterest and about talking to clients about how they want things. What is the way how do you get from your clients the answer of how, like, where do you find the real answer to how they want to live? Because sometimes we can all say how we think we'd like to live, but it's not always accurate.
Well, initially, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, when you see them in the first meeting, you know, we are all like, after doing this for so long, I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing this, but, you know, we all determined I've been doing it for 26 years. So I do think that we all have a little Lucy, the doctor is in 10 cents sign on our desk too. So we are like analyzing people in a certain way. I mean, without getting like, I mean, not that I want anybody to think like that's the first thing I do when they see me, is like analyze them. But you know, you sort of gauge, I mean, in the conversation, you sort of feel out, do they like art? Do they like antiques? Like, how do they live? Do they have kids? Do they have pets? And then you, of course, look at, you know, I mean, that's what I do. I look what they're wearing. So that already gives you like a clue. Oh, they're more like a Jill Sander person, or they're more like a Versace person, or they're more, you know, everything in one, whatever. And, you know, that's sort of great because I don't put them, I don't how is it called? I don't put them in a drawer and say like, oh, this is the person, but it sort of gives you a lot of clues. I mean, you can tell like the quality of their clothing, the way they behave, the way what are they eating, what are they drinking. I mean, whatever it is, you sort of get a taste of how sophisticated they are or not. And, you know, you sort of go that way.
What does, yeah, that's it. Well, okay, so you're very specific about saying that you are client-centric, which I think is the only way to have a long career, right? I mean, we have to give clients their style, and it also makes it so much more fun for us to change it up all the time. But if you had to point to something as showing that a room was done by you, like a tell, what would it be? I would think for me it would be my furniture plans. I feel like my furniture plans are very, you know, structured a certain way.
Yeah, but people don't see your furniture plan when they go into the room.
No, but when you walk into a room, you can see the placement of the furniture.
Oh.
But I mean, that's, yes, point taken. It's a subtle tell, and like how many ways you're going to put that sofa anyway. But what is the thing that you think is very Heissmannish?
Well, I think I'm like, let's call it a Harryism, would be that there is like something somewhere in the room that is not necessarily like right in your face, but you sit down and you start talking and then you look over and you're like, what in the F is that? So, and then, you know, like what I mean
like is, a swan behind your head?
Well, like a conversation piece, and I mean, not like a little league bowl. That's not what I mean.
Please.
Yeah.
Please, no.
So it's like something that's like, you know, there could be a piece of art, it could be a sculpture, it could be something you pulled in, or some really funny. I mean, you know, I tend to find like, I mean, I can go like wherever, and I find these like funny things that then I sometimes give to clients, sometimes sell to clients, depending on how much money they have.
yeah. And how much the thing is.
Yeah, and how much the thing is. No, but you know, I think I'm pretty generous at that. So I give them things, I find them things, and you know, you go to like an antique shop, or you go to an antique mall, or like whatever it is, which I love to do still to this day. And you know, you see things, and I mean, I find myself now like I'm taking pictures and I'm sending them to friends and clients, and I'm saying, hey, I'm at this antique mall and I'm looking at whatever it is. And, you know, lots of times they say like, well, send it, I want it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm constantly shopping in my head, imaginary at times for myself. Yeah. And so I think there's always a conversation piece or some quirky detail, or there's like, you know, crushed abalone shell in the Venetian plaster. There's something that people, I don't want to say don't expect.
Something unique.
Yeah, something unique. And there's always, if I can, there's always a crazy powder room.
Great. You know, who doesn't love a crazy powder room?
Well, you know, the crazy powder room is important because that's what people take with them. And that's actually funny enough what everybody talks about when they go like to a party.
When they go.
Well, they're on the go and they go and they tell you where they go. No, but you know, they come from the party and they would talk to friends and they would say like, oh, and then there was this crazy powder room that was like, you know, chartreuse green. and had like all sorts of things happening, it's fine. You know, it's really fun.
Now, I think Nupur has just asked you an interesting question. She says, if somebody hires you, it's a certain vibe. Is it a certain vibe that you're bringing, or is it malleable and totally client-centric?
It actually is totally client-centric, and it's actually like, you know, this is one of my favorite things about the talk that you do, because people always judge you by what appears in the magazine, what appears in the editorial, which of course is always like the most colorful thing, the most crazy thing. So I often at times hear like, oh yeah, you're that person that does like all this crazy stuff and all these crazy colors. Well, what people don't know is I've done period houses and period rooms. I've done anything from super modern to super classic through traditional. I will sort of, when I'm working with people, I will sort of try to take them places that they didn't know they wanted to go, or places that they wanted to see. So there is a sense of adventure and experiment and, you know, something fun. I mean, listen,
Expansion.
This is, I find, and this is what sort of bothers me to no extent, our job is supposed to be fun. I mean, it is a job, and it's a hard job.
Or at least joyful.
But you know what? We're not performing brain surgery. We're not, you know, we're not open heart surgery people. But we're supposed to bring fun to people. And, you know, we're supposed to make them see that there's probably something that they didn't know they would like.
Yeah.
And that I find the fascinating thing, because often at times, I mean, and I've had this happen, that like really conservative, preppy clients would come, and I would present like what I want them to do, and they would be like, well, that's probably like a little more than we wanted to do, but we really like it.
Yeah.
So, you know, go on that hot balloon ride, you know, go on that, you know, and also, and then this is one of my favorite things that I always use when people say like, oh, like, you know, how do you like deal with all that? I said, just put it in a balloon and let it go.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel should be like a little sign.
Emily Erdman just told us that you said that.
Say again?
Emily Erdman.
Oh.
Erdman's just told us that expression and credited it to you.
Yeah, I mean, like really, I mean, it's like none of this is like, you know, life-threatening, and it's like, let's have fun with it.
But it is important.
No,
You know,
I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, like we still have to respect it and give it its due, but yes, it must be joyful.
Well, you know, there is the business thing, which caters to, you know, what you just said, the respect, and, you know, because it all.
Well, and also, like, look at you. You went to that school. You got into that school, and you went to it, and you studied it, and you had the 3 internships, and you had the various moments of grooming at the various places you were before you opened your own shop. There's a lot that, you know, it's not a wingding.
But the reason I'm saying, like, the reason I added the client-centric to my logo was because I wanted people to understand this is not just, I'm not selling one look.
Totally.
Or like one brand. I mean, I can basically mingle them. I can work in just one. I can do like monochromatic interiors if someone wanted that. Whatever, you know, it's like
as long as it's beautiful, you can do it. Is there any style that you would hate to work in?
You know, I think hate is like a pretty strong word.
It is a pretty strong word.
I would probably no, because I think, you know, each period and each, like, you know, historic like era has its charms, and, you know, it's like something is always special about it. And what I will say is, and this is always interesting to me, like everybody is always trying to reinvent the wheel, or they're like, oh, like, and when I read these things, they make me cringe, like, oh, and then the designer designed the chair, and I'm like, that's a Christmas chair, and it existed in the pyramids, and it has nothing to do with you designing it. So if there is something that's already has been perfected ish.
Yes. You could make a comparison to somebody saying, my husband designed my engagement ring. Like, yeah, he picked it out. Or, yeah, it's still a ring. Is a ring is a ring.
Right.
As is a rose. So what's happening for you for the next 10 years? What do you want to happen?
Wow, that's a good one.
I feel like we've had this year to reflect, or more than a year. Not all at once, because obviously we've still been doing stuff, but haven't we all kind of taken stock?
Well, maybe some carte blanche clients wouldn't be bad.
Definitely. I wish that for us all.
I'm not like, so here's the thing. I'm not complaining. I'm working on like a few fun projects at the moment. I also branched out, like plus my own brand. I just took a position as a design director in an office in Charleston, South Carolina.
That's amazing.
And it's Elizabeth Stewart, and I just started working there in March. It's like a brand new
venture. That's fabulous.
It is sort of an extension of the teaching, because I'm sort of, enjoying working in a team. Haven't done that in a long time, in that way. And, it's sort of really fun and working out really well so far.
Yeah.
And, that's that. I did not close. I mean, my own brand is still around.
Oh yeah.
But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do like a few really great quality projects on my own, and then work more in like a mentor position.
That's wonderful. That is playing it forward, paying it forward. Sorry.
It is a little like that, and like someone was saying to me, like, oh my God, that's so Albert.
It is
to sort of
that
like,
generation. They were so good at mentoring,
and it's in the South.
It's in the South.
So anyway,
yeah.
So that's what's happening. It's there's a lot of you probably know what I mean when I say this. Like, the older you get, the harder it becomes to sort of like do this reinventing thing that everybody's always talking about.
Yeah.
When the pandemic was like at its height and everybody was saying like, oh, now we all have to like reinvent ourselves. I was sort of like sitting here thinking like, well, like, reinvent myself doing what?
No, and I don't think there's any pressure to reinvent oneself. I think it was more like we had to take stock. It was a moment to reflect. It was a moment that we had not had before to take stock of everything. So anyway, we are at 2. I'm so excited to have spoken to you, and I love what it sounds like you're up to, because I think that we creatives, we need to really shovel the coal into our engines. We need all of those creative outlets. So I think going to the South and doing this new thing, it's gonna feed you like mad.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really great. I'm really excited, and it's I can't believe it's been an hour. It feels like we talked for like 5 minutes.
I know. Well, as I tell everybody, it's like one is not enough. Or now that the doors are open, maybe I can actually see some people in person.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yes, please. Thank you, Danke, so much. And you also, I feel Albert, I feel your love for him, and I think it's great that you're doing this mentoring. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Dankeschön.
Bitte.
I see you very soon. Take care.
I hope so.
Bye.
Love you, Harry.
Love you.
Bye.
See you later.